Hey guys, welcome back. And we just got finished watching a brutal Florida State game. For the second week in a row, Florida State looks like one of the worst teams in the country right now. DJ Uiagalelei is just brutal. Wouldn't be shocked if he gets benched next week, but we are in for our weekly stock reports. Now, a bit of an update here. There will be no stock report for week 2. Got some weekend plans, getting married this weekend, so obviously not going to be able to record those, but they will be back for week 3. Stay tuned for that. Also have my power rankings going up tomorrow. One of my favorite pieces of content I've ever put together. I think it's really, really good, and I'm excited to kind of continue to go through that each and every week with you guys. Leave a like on this video. Subscribe if you are new. Leave a comment and let me know who you guys thought were some of the biggest winners and losers of the first full slate of the college football season. Now, if you guys missed it last week, the way this works, we're going to go through some prospects and teams that helped or hurt their stock. We're going to be going through the teams that fell out of the top 25, take a look at the top 25, and give my Heisman prediction. So this is a project that we're going to be updating each and every week. So if you guys are interested, hit that notification bell so you never miss out on a video. But let's go ahead and get into it with the first winner of the week. That's going to go to Drew Aller. Now, coming into the week, I believe I had Drew Aller as my number 19 quarterback in the draft class. He was a player that I just couldn't get on board with. I mean, you saw the athletic tools, you saw the arm. Could he piece it all together? And, well, he looked really, really good for Penn State against West Virginia, who isn't a bad defense by any means. They have a strong secondary. They've got good players on the defensive front. This is a West Virginia team that I thought was going to win this game, in all honesty. I was not in on Penn State this year because of my question marks with Drew Aller, and he was fantastic. I mean, he was just slinging the ball to all 3 levels. He looked accurate, and I think it really shows how much this new playbook is going to benefit a guy like Drew Aller because they really wanted to tap into his arm, and they showcased that. He had some really good shots along the middle of the field. He looked comfortable. He looked composed. And he entered the top 10. I know that's a big jump from him, but he was really impressive. And a quarterback that I was low on, he's still towards the bottom half of the top 10. We need to see him be more consistent. But it was a very promising week from a quarterback that I really wasn't a fan of. I really didn't like him, but he's got the size. He's got the arm. He looks like he could be a player that could play himself into first-round talks. I know some people already had him there because of the upside, but he definitely played up to that level, and I was really impressed. He was a huge winner for me this week. Coming in as a loser, it's the Oregon Ducks. Oregon was near 50-point favorites against Idaho at home, and just an embarrassing performance from this team. Oregon was my pick to be in the national championship game. I had them matched up with Georgia, which I think one of those teams still looks like they could definitely get there. Oregon has fallen from my number 3 team all the way outside of the college football playoff after what we saw this week. I get it's a win. I saw an Oregon fan say, how did we drop after a win? Don't even ask that question. You know why you dropped after a win. Idaho had every chance to come back in that game. They had some injuries. They got banged up late. But this team just couldn't stop Idaho. And if they played a good team, an FBS school, they probably don't win that game. Dylan Gabriel put up numbers. Tez Johnson had an all right game, but this is an Oregon team that has to figure things out quickly because this isn't the Pac-12 anymore. You're going up against Big Ten. You're going up against great offenses and great defenses. I think there was only one team that lost in the Big Ten this week. Oregon has to get their act together because that was an embarrassing performance, and they were a big loser for me in the top 25, as you guys will see later on. Another winner for me has to be Cam Ward. Cam Ward was a player that I did a prospect spotlight on this weekend, so if you guys missed that, be sure to go check it out. But had a lot of question marks around him. Could he be accurate with the football? There's a lot of inconsistencies in his tape last year at Washington State. Could he piece it all together? Could he showcase that athleticism? And could he showcase the arm? Washington State's play calling was horrible last year. They had him running so many screens, short outs, and just getting the ball out of his hands quickly. And he was incredible for Miami this past weekend. He showed why he is looked at as a Heisman frontrunner, as one of the biggest transfers coming in. Miami's back. I mean, I picked them to go undefeated, win the ACC. I mean, that looks like that's going to be aged really, really well because the ACC just looks horrible. But Cam Ward looked awesome. I mean, the comfortability that he had in the pocket, his footwork, his ability to move up into the pocket and make throws. That 3rd and 11 touchdown throw he had in the back of the end zone was incredible. I mean, he made plays happen with his legs. He was safe, didn't take hits that he didn't need to take. And he has weapons. And the offensive line, I mean, there were so many players I could have picked for Miami. I thought Xavier Restrepo was freaking awesome. He was a big my guy in the summer. I had him as the number 10 receiver in the class. He looked like that. He's an incredible route runner, good body control. I mean, early in the game, Cam Ward, you were like, oh boy, like this could be tough after he threw the interception. Since then, though, after that, he looked like one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Slinging the ball to all 3 levels, looked so comfortable. Florida had no chance. And Cam Ward is a player that I would entertain first-round conversations on at this point. A player that I wouldn't have taken there. I thought he was more of a second-round player, but he definitely played himself into that conversation. Another loser for me are the Clemson Tigers. Clemson is a team that, I mean, I told people all offseason, jump off the Clemson train. Like, I get it. We all love Dabo Swinney, but I had this team finishing 8-4 this year, making a bowl game, but not even being in the ACC title game. And this team looked horrible on Saturday. Now, I get it. Oh, they played Georgia. How are you going to have that? No, stop. This was a Clemson team that could not move the ball for the entirety of the game. You have all of these weapons and this theoretical upside with Cade Klubnik, who I like Cade Klubnik. At least I did coming into the week. He was horrible. I mean, just couldn't complete passes. He was inaccurate with the football, turned it over, and you put up 3 points. Now, again, I get it's Georgia, but this is a team that has high expectations. You come in as a top 15 team. You've got to show the people something. You've got to show that, okay, we deserved this ranking. We can be a good football team. No, you didn't show anything. And now, I mean, they've dropped out of the top 25 for me altogether. I think they were on the fringe as it was because I just don't see it with this team. I get the defense is supposed to be really good. And for the first 2 quarters, they looked pretty good. The second half of that game, though, I mean, you fell apart. Clemson goes on this crazy run. I think they scored 31 points or something in the second half. And like, they couldn't stop anybody. This is a team that I just think has so many question marks. And I said it in the offseason. I'll say it again. Dabo Swinney's failure to adapt is going to lose him his job here at Clemson. He doesn't want to tap into the transfer portal. Look at what Georgia did. London Humphreys was their leading receiver. He came from the portal. Dabo needs to get the memo. In today's college football, you have to utilize the transfer portal. And I think his failure to do that is going to cost Clemson a season. And again, I know it was Georgia, but that was just an embarrassing show for an offense that had high expectations, was supposed to be good. You had all of these weapons, and they talked so highly of. I'm all out on Clemson. I just don't see it this year for them. Another big winner for me was Taylon Green. Now, this was kind of a player that was under the radar, transferred from Boise State, comes to Arkansas, and an Arkansas team that lost KJ Jefferson. They lost Raheem Sanders. They had some guys go to the draft and looked at as one of the bottom feeders right now in the SEC. And Taylon Green was incredible in the opener. Had 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. Looked so comfortable, so accurate. Him and Jaquindon Jackson both could have been mentioned here because Arkansas really feasted, and their team that we saw it last year, they wanted to run the football with KJ Jefferson. I think Taylon Green gives you a little bit of that, but I think he gives you a little bit more upside. The arm, the accuracy, it all looked really sharp. We knew he was a very athletic quarterback coming from a Boise State team that really liked to tap into the athleticism of their quarterback, but what kind of player were you getting? We didn't really know, and looks like Arkansas found their quarterback. Now, I don't think he's going to come out in the 2025 draft. I think he's probably going to be a 2026 prospect to keep an eye on, but really, really good performance, and he was a player that I thought was really impressive this weekend, and definitely a player that I'm going to be turning on the film from that game and kind of tapping in to see what he's all about. Another loser for me is Shiloh Sanders. And I don't even want to spend a lot of time here because he's just so frustrating to watch. And I, as a person that lived in the Colorado area for most of my life, like I'm pulling for this Colorado team. I don't understand the hate around this program. I get it. But Shiloh Sanders has to be one of the most infuriating watches on my screen every week. The unnecessary late hits. I mean, you could penalize this guy on like a third of the passes that he's on. We knew he had discipline issues, but it was on full display against North Dakota State. And I mean, I have him as a fifth round prospect because I don't think he's that good. I mean, he had a couple of big interceptions here. He had a couple of big plays, but overall, like, I think he's slow. I think he's stiff. And then when you factor in that he just has no discipline, I don't even think I would draft Shiloh Sanders. In all honesty, he was a player that really, really disappointed me, and he's on the down low, and he is dropping this week for me. Another loser of the week is Toriano Pride is a winner of the week from Missouri. Now, this is another guy that Clemson lost to the portal that I guarantee you they wish they had right now. Toriano Pride was a bit of an interesting one. He's transferred from Clemson to Missouri and didn't really play much last year. He was on my radar, like as a guy that I could definitely see breaking out, but I kind of had on my draft board, on my Patreon, which I will leave linked below. You guys can get all the access to all my evaluations, starting to dive into the film from this past week a little bit. So getting some new prospects on the board. But Toriano Pride was a player that transferred from Clemson that was supposed to be one of the big transfers, didn't really see the field a lot for Clemson. He was really, really good for a Missouri team that led the SEC in yards allowed this week, which is really impressive. Only 85 yards allowed in the game this past weekend against Murray State. And Toriano Pride, with a pick six in this game, I believe was targeted 5 times, allowed 1 completion for 5 yards, and he had the pick six. Looked really fluid, looked really athletic, and he looked like the player that we thought they would be getting out of the portal. Now, I haven't looked into all the film from his game, but really impressed with his yards allowed, all of that sort of stuff, and definitely a player that is on the radar and a guy that I am looking at towards next draft season as a potential riser. Another loser for me is going to be KJ Jefferson. I get UCF won the game. He was horrible in the first half of this game. I mean, KJ Jefferson was a quarterback that some people really liked. They were like, I mean, he's athletic, but he's got a crazy good arm. I just never saw it with KJ Jefferson. I could never get there. For one, he's got such a weird build for a quarterback. I believe he's around 240 pounds. He's really athletic, yes, but that's part of his downfall because he relies on his athleticism way too much. And I don't think he's very accurate with the football. This is a player that I would not be touching in the draft because I think, yeah, you have this theoretical upside due to his athleticism, but it just hasn't really amounted to anything. We saw it a little bit back in 2022 at Arkansas. You're like, wait a second, this KJ Jefferson guy might be good. 2023 was not good, and so far, I think RJ Harvey and Penny Boone really carried them in their first game. Now, UCF has upside, but I really do struggle. If KJ Jefferson's your quarterback, I have some concerns about what the ceiling of your program is going to be. And so he is a loser of the weekend from me. Another player here, Connor Wigman. This one pains me because I do really like Connor Wigman. I think we talked about it all summer. Who is going to be the quarterback one going into the year? You obviously had your Carson Becks, your Shadur Sanders, really at the top of the boards. And there was that Connor Wigman fan base that was like, yes, Wigman's the guy. Keep your eyes on Connor Wigman. He was absolutely atrocious. And there was this conversation that he was sick or whatever it might be. He just didn't look good. He just couldn't hit passes. The accuracy was way off. I thought the play calling was pretty telling. I get Mike Elko. It's his first game. You're going up against a really good Notre Dame defense. Really just showed a lack of trust in Wigman because the first drive, I mean, he slang it pretty good, was thrown across the middle. You're like, okay, this guy's got something. And after that, it really just fell off, and this offense came to a crashing halt pretty quickly. Wigman's still in my top 10. I'm not really out on Connor Wigman just yet, but under the biggest stage, a quarterback that's coming off an injury that you're expecting to be your number one guy, really disappointed. And It's a Texas A&M team that I had fringe top 25. They fell out, and Wigman is a part of the reason why. You need to have good quarterback play. Wigman just didn't come to play, and he ended up having a pretty bad week and dropping for me. Next up, we've got Deion Burks from Oklahoma. This was a really interesting player, really interesting transfer. Had supposedly a really good spring at Oklahoma, and he showed out in his first game against Temple. 3 touchdowns as that slot weapon. He's a really interesting one because he's a really solid route runner. He's got good speed. He's got really solid hands. It's really the size on him and kind of the physicality of the position that you worry about. But looked really, really impressive. He's the only receiver that we have here. We could talk about Tetairoa McMillan, who had 4 touchdowns. Travis Hunter looked amazing. Trey Harris, Tez Johnson, Ty Felton is a player that I'm keeping on my radar. Like, really good wide receiver performances. But Deion Burks looked very impressive. He looked the part as this big transfer receiver coming over from Purdue. I thought he was really, really good for an Oklahoma team that has expectations this year in the SEC. I get it's Temple, but he put up good numbers, and he was a winner of the week to me. Another loser for me is Graham Mertz, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I was a big Graham Mertz believer coming into the year. I'm like, we got to stop sleeping on this Graham Mertz guy as a potential like sleeper quarterback down the board. He had a really solid year. Yeah, I'm out. I'm all the way out on Graham Mertz. He was horrible for Florida this weekend. Bad throws, ended up getting injured in the game. They went to DJ Lagway because they just needed some sort of an answer. I wouldn't be surprised if DJ Lagway is starting by like week 4 because Graham Mertz was just really, really bad in this game. And I do like Graham Mertz. I thought the upside was there, but when you look at the overall frame of his career, when you've had Wisconsin where you really struggled, 1 good year at Florida, I think Graham Mertz's quarterback sleeper agenda has fallen off for me, and he was a big loser of the week as well. Another winner for me was Josiah Stewart, the edge from Michigan, a player that I was pretty low on coming into the year. I think I had him on like edge 16, 17. I said I needed to see more as a pass rusher from him because he had upside there, and he really showed out. I believe he had 5 pressures, 2 sacks against Fresno State. Pretty good Fresno State offensive line, I should say, and had a really good week. Was really impressed with what he did. The athleticism was there. He showed up on the box score as well. A couple of sacks, had some nice pressures in big-time situations for Michigan. Michigan had a pretty down week as a whole, but I thought Josiah Stewart was a bright spot for them, and he was a big winner for me. Another loser as a whole, it's the Florida Gators. Probably could have left this one out. I just don't know if this team gets to 4 wins this year. It's really what it comes down to. Brutal schedule, questions at the quarterback position, and the defense just looked like butter. The Miami offense was just cutting through this defense the entire game. I got a lot of concerns about Florida. I already had them at like 5 wins. They might not get to 4. It's going to be a rough season for the Gators. Another winner for me was Keon Sabb, 2 interceptions in the first half against Western Kentucky, and a transfer from Michigan. Alabama knows defensive backs. They bring in Keon Sabb. They bring in Damani Jackson. And Sabb looked the part. I mean, he's a guy that a lot of people are like, yeah, this guy could be one of the top safeties in this class. He definitely caught my attention. I need to look at the film a little bit more, but he's probably going to end up in the top 5 safeties by the end of the year for me. Maybe in that 3-4 range. I wouldn't be shocked. I still think Malachi Starks and Kevin Winston are the 2 clear top guys in this class, and both of those guys showed out this week. But Keon Sabb, you have 2 interceptions. I was impressed. I thought he showed good ball skills. He was really productive in limited time for Michigan. I think he's going to be a really interesting name to keep an eye on this season. Another loser are the Virginia Tech Hokies, a team that wasn't quite in my top 25. I think I had them, though, in the top 30. This one hurt because I thought I had Virginia Tech in the ACC title game. Now, granted, the ACC as a whole just looked horrible this week outside of like 2 or 3 teams. But Virginia Tech, I think, really, they struggled. The second half of this game, they started to go on a run, couldn't finish in overtime, but It's against Vanderbilt. Like, that's a winnable game for you, and you lost. So, I mean, a lot of question marks around this team. The defense really struggled, a defensive unit that is returning most of their guys. You also had an offense that just couldn't really get it going until the second half of the game. I got concerns about Virginia Tech, and they are a loser of the week for me. Another winner for me is going to be Jahdae Barron. Texas used him in a different role this year. He played the slot. They kind of put him on the boundary to kind of see what he could be. Really interesting player. I mean, the athleticism, the ball skills, the hip flexibility, it's all there for him. Can he kind of piece it together? And he definitely did. Had an interception against Colorado State, which the funniest thing is when the Colorado State head coach, like, what's stopping us from going 12-0? You got blown out by Texas in week 1, 52-0. So Jahdae Barron, a player that I did like, I thought was really good. He looked the part. He looked like a good outside corner that could play himself into day 2 consideration. Really liked what he showed. And then the last loser of the week, it's going to be Donovan Edwards. He fell out of my I'm debating. Let me know if you guys want to see this. Kind of an updated positional rankings through the draft each week, because the running back position definitely saw some movement. Nick Singleton, Kyle Monangai, and Joe Quavius, Woody Marks all moving ahead of Donovan Edwards. I mean, you're the number 1 back, and he just couldn't get anything going. Couldn't establish any sort of consistency on the ground. Couldn't establish anything like in the receiving department. Just a really poor performance from Donovan Edwards, and he has dropped pretty substantially for me in my running back rankings. Take a look at the Heisman race at the moment, and at number 1, we talked about it. It's Cam Ward, player that I was really impressed by this week. Had all the tools coming into the year. It was more so a question of, can he piece it all together? And he definitely showcased that, and he is right now the leader to me. Travis Hunter is my number 2. I know a lot of people are going to talk about Genty, McMillan, Dart, Yamalieva from Tennessee as well is in that consideration. And I mean, I'm a Tennessee fan. I got him on the outside just because you play Chattanooga, but Travis Hunter, I think, deserves to be in this conversation. 3 touchdowns, missed 2 snaps the entire game. Was absolutely incredible for Colorado. And I mean, I don't see how, with what he did in that game, I don't see how he can not be in the race. Tetairoa McMillan, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns on like 10 receptions. Absolutely absurd stuff. I mean, I still have Burden as my wide receiver 1, but McMillan and Hunter are like right there for it. Jackson Dart had like 450 yards and 6 touchdowns at the first half against Furman. I mean, Dart is a quarterback that is really intriguing. You're in a very quarterback-friendly offense at Ole Miss, but I definitely think I would consider him in the first round. And then Ashton Genty as well breaks the record for rushing touchdowns and rushing yards for a Boise State running back in the same game. 2 of these 5 will get prospect spotlights next week. I won't tell you which 2, but use the process of elimination based on who I've done and who I haven't. Really impressive stuff from these 5, and this is kind of the leaderboard going into week 2. The teams that dropped out of the top 25, Clemson we talked about, Texas A&M we talked about a little bit. West Virginia, they were kind of on the back end of my top 25. Garrett Green looked really tough, and they just couldn't establish the run game that we saw last year. And then obviously Florida State. I don't know. I mean, Florida State looked horrible again. DJ Uiagalelei needs to be benched. They cannot keep doing this. And then the run game was just brutal. I mean, run the ball. Like, I just didn't get it. Like, Toafili had some success when they gave him like 1 carry. Utilize the run game. You have running backs. You have a guy in Roydale Williams and Lawrence Toafili. Run the freaking ball. Just run the ball. Your quarterback sucks. Utilize the run game. And they just couldn't figure it out. The offensive line is a disaster. The defense is a disaster. Florida State season is over. It's over. They have no chance to make the college football playoff now, and they are outside the top 25. So let's take a look at the new updated top 25 and a lot of teams moving up. We're going to go 1 through 25 here pretty quickly. Georgia, Ohio State staying the same. Both of them look dominant in their performance. Ole Miss jumps from number 5 to number 3. They jump Texas. Texas looked really good this week. They stay where they're at, but Ole Miss was just dominant. Like we talked about Jackson Dart, Trey Amos was fantastic. Trey Harris was really good. Juice Wells, really good performance from quite a few players on that team. Texas stayed the same. Alabama jumps into the top 5. I was really impressed with their offense. And we talked about Keon Sabb, how impressive he looked. Miami, a team that I had, I believe, at number 14, they jump up to number 6. I was so impressed with both sides of the ball. Tyler Barron was out of this world. Utah stays the same. Penn State jumps up, a team that I had pretty low on here. They jump up after a dominant offensive and defensive showing. Notre Dame stays where they are. They were really impressive. Michigan drops a little bit. Too many concerns about the quarterback. They couldn't establish a run game, barely beat Fresno State. Tennessee and Missouri stay the same, both SEC teams that I was really impressed with. Oregon drops. We talked about that. USC, they jump up from the number 23 spot up to number 14. Really impressive stuff. They can tackle now. It's a miracle. USC can tackle. Miller Moss looked fantastic. Kyron Hudson with 2 incredible plays. They looked the part. Kansas State stays where they're at. They've had a pretty good win. Avery Johnson looked solid. LSU drops ever so slightly. One of the only teams that went 0-1 that dropped in the top 25 because you lost to a good team. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here, and you still looked good. This isn't a Clemson or a West Virginia or even an A&M situation. They looked pretty good in this game. Oklahoma State drops, or Oklahoma State stays the same. They looked pretty good against a powerhouse FCS school in South Dakota State. And then we're getting into some risers here. Oklahoma just jumps up 1 spot after their performance against Temple. Jackson Arnold looked really, really good. Kansas jumps up into my top 25. I was pretty impressed with Devin Neal, one of my guys in this class. He looks the part, and I think they jump Arizona, who had a really good performance, but man, got off to a really slow start. I got some concerns about that team. Louisville, they jump up. I thought they were the best ACC team not named Miami this week. NC State jumps out of the top 25, as well as so does Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech 2-0 now. They've looked really good for 2 weeks. NC State got it going in the second half. KC Concepcion is awesome. And then Iowa, they jump up into the top 25 as well. The defense looked good, and Cade McNamara wasn't a liability. And Nebraska, Dylan Raiola looks legit, and they stay in at number 25. A few other teams that were kind of on the outside looking in. I mean, you could obviously talk about a few of these Big Ten schools that played pretty well. I think the SEC is getting a little bit of love. I know a lot of people are kind of putting Auburn in their top 25s right now after they had a really good showing. Cam Coleman looked the part. Some really good stuff that we saw this weekend. And yeah, that's going to do it for me in this video. Let me know which teams you guys are on board with, who is going to be in your top 25 entering the week, which teams fell off, which players impressed. Let me know down in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.